Hello, folks. I think we're going to get started. I was going to make since it was just Passover, I was going to make an Elijah joke, but I'm not sure everybody would get that. But our empty chair at the end. We're just waiting. We're one more panelist still to join us, but I think we'll get started because we got a tight time frame, and getting all these people to have their brilliant thoughts shared with all of you in 40 minutes is going to be tricky enough as it is. So I think we'll get started. So I'm Doug Lederman, editor and co-founder of Inside Higher Ed. Thanks to all of you for being here. Hope you're having a good conference so far. We're going to pretty much jump right in. I'm going to just give a really brief overview of what we're going to talk about today, and then I'm going to let the panelists briefly introduce themselves and dive right in. So we have seen an explosion of non-degree credentials over the last few years, in recent years, and there's a lot of talk about the huge potential upside in terms of giving more people more options to advance themselves professionally and otherwise, and to pursue the middle class dream that post-high school education has long promised. Whether it's delivered on that fully is another matter. There are also, though, potential downsides, or at least questions about this explosion of alternative credentials, shorter than degree credentials, mostly revolving around our historical difficulty in measuring learning of any kind. We don't do a great job of that in this country, and in allocating opportunity in ways that deliver the possibility, at least, of equitable outcomes. Even our collection of traditional credentials and 2-year, 4-year degrees, masters, et cetera, doesn't really operate as a system in any way that would commonly be used in terms of the clear flow through it, good pathways that are logical and smooth to transfer through. But there are some, by now, well-established structures and mechanisms in place, governments, accreditors, other things, to help make sense of it and to make at least a head fake toward ensuring quality. So the question that's sort of before us today, and that we're going to talk about a good bit here, is how do we and how do learners make sense of this kind of Wild West environment that we have around new and emerging credentials, and just a remarkable sort of expansion of them to ensure that more learners end up in a better place. Got a great group of panelists to join in that conversation, and actually I'm going to let them all. Anant Agarwal from edX is not here, and I'm guessing he will show up shortly. Hopefully he may have been sent to the wrong place by a certain moderator. So what question I want to ask each of you to take in turn is, looking 5 years out, please sum up in sort of a ratio of 100 your level of confidence that the emergence of this set of non-degree credentials accomplishes what we hope it will in terms of more learners with more good outcomes, more satisfied employers feeling like they have a ready pool of talent, versus your level of worry that we end up with more suboptimal outcomes, either more learners getting credentials but not necessarily being better off financially or educationally, more debt, et cetera. And so I want a quick introduction of who you are in a sentence, that ratio, and I'll share mine at the end. And what is that likeliest downside? I'm going to start with you.
Hi, Bill Hughes. I'm president and CEO of Education Design Lab. Real briefly about us. Welcome, Anant. I thought this was Passover and we had to have an empty chair, but so glad to see you.
Chair's over there.
Bill Hughes.
We forgot your walk-up music.
So our passion is the new majority learner. And we define new majority learner as simply the majority, the 60% or more, specifically in the United States, of adults without a college degree. So that's a real problem. And because I think the majority, 75% or so of jobs are expected to require some sort of degree or higher ed credential, there's a problem there. So that's the problem that we focus on. Confidence level, 95%, with a caveat. Is that I listened carefully to your question, and you asked, will it get better? Absolutely. A lot of work that's being done right now in this space. I don't see anybody going in the wrong direction. What I see is a gap between the pace at which we're able to make impact and the demand. And there's some real serious issues that we have to worry about, ranging from the fact that we can no longer really count on an immigration strategy to fill jobs. We've got to do it ourselves. We're seeing increasing unrest because of economic inequality, in the sense that just things aren't working out for me. So what's the contract with America that workers have with one another and with the economy? And then, oh yeah, there's AI that's threatening to take everybody's job. But as much as that we have crisis there, I think we have opportunity. So my hope is it's 95%, in terms of us getting somewhere. Quite a bit lower when I think about in 5 years will we be able to make up ground, but we have a chance of doing it.
Liesl.
My name is Liesl Riddle. I'm at George Washington University. Contrary to what our moderator just said, there are some examples out there, I would like to think, in the degree earning space that have done stackables really well. I just came from the School of Business where we built a stackable system. 27 graduate certificates, 32 4+1 programs, and several versions of our MBA and specialized master's degree, all of which were stackable from beginning to end. So I was brought over to the College of Professional Studies to kind of do the same thing there for the entire college. I will say I love the title of this particular panel, because after we built our stackable system in the college before, they brought me a picture of Wonder Woman made of Legos, and it still sits in the graduate school over in the School of Business.
Confidence level. Liesl.
So
You need the. We need.
I'm sorry, confidence level, 70% for, 30% concerned.
Great.
So I'm Ashutosh Tiwary. I'm at the College of Information Technology at WGU. Before I give you an answer, I'd like to spend a little bit about my background, because that'll help you understand what my answer will be. So I came from the tech industry. The most important thing to know about me is I know nothing about education until I started running the college, and I learned everything on the job. So most important thing here is things can be learned on the job. I'm an example of that. From an industry perspective, what's important is skills. And skills, it's about skills and consumption model by the employer and by the student. It's not about degrees or credentials. So to the extent that students can acquire those skills incrementally, and to the extent that providers are willing to provide pathways for them to acquire those skills, I don't see any reason why this is not going to be 100%.
Within 5 years?
Or within 5 years.
Yeah.
90%. Just because of what I've learned at WGU.
Okay. Anant, did you need me to repeat the question?
That would be great, thank you.
So I'm basically asking for a ratio of your confidence that in the next 5 years, we will sort of end up with sort of the good outcome that we're looking for, which is more learners with more good outcomes, more satisfied employers. In other words, confidence that this sort of set of non-degree credentials accomplishes what we want it to, versus your level of worry that we end up with more suboptimal outcomes for learners through the sort of explosion of credentials, our potential, what I see as potential inability to judge which ones are good and which ones are bad, right now at least. So I want a ratio of and we had 95-5, 70-30, 98 and 2.
Sure. So my name is Anant Agarwal. I've been a professor at MIT for 35 years and founder of edX, and now Chief Platform Officer at 2U after a merger of 2U and edX. Having taught at university for many years, what universities think about, what we think about is degrees. And it's a hammer, and that's a solution to all nails, right? So is it upskilling or for the future? And the dream is that the learner is 18 years of age. They come in, the ideal learner comes in for 4 years. But there are 39 million adults in the US that, what you might call non-traditional, that have some college but no degree. And the whole world keeps changing. If there's one constant in this world today, it's change. And with technological change, and then AI and ChatGPT comes in, you have to keep upskilling and reskilling all the time. So even if you had a degree to begin with, you need to keep upskilling. And frankly, I think it's not a one-size-fits-all where you have this degree that you come in at the age of 18 and finish in 4 years. I think we need to have both. We need to have alternative credentials that are quicker, faster, more affordable, and career-focused. And so at edX, for example, we launched a number of credentials, professional certificate programs from top universities and companies, boot camps that you can earn and upskill and advance your career within about 6 months. And these are all credentials that we've worked with universities and helped them create. This is one example where universities left to themselves, where as a professor, I promise you, until I did edX, I did edX about 12 years ago, and for the 22 years, all I did was degrees. When that's what you did degrees. And so with these public-private partnerships that we form with universities, we create newer credentials, look at needs in the market, look at upskilling and reskilling. But I don't think it's an either or. I think it's and I think we need to develop and thinking. Get these credentials, and if they stack up into and get credit into degrees, you can get full degrees. And so in terms of numbers, my confidence is, I would say 90%. You never want to say 100 because bad things, the word's not perfect. I would say 90% if you assume that when you get the credentials can also stack up into full degrees like our Southern Methodist University boot camp. When learners complete that, they can stack the credit into a data science degree at SMU, also online. And so once you have the stackability, what's to lose?
Is that a question? Do you want to know what's to lose? I'll tell you. So I would put mine at about 65%. I'll take the low end confidence. And what we are seeing an explosion of providers, some of which are well known, some of which are potentially fly by night. And we have plenty of experience in this large post-secondary and education and training ecosystem of providers who have incentive to develop credentials that may or may not be of value. And as I said, I come from a space where in traditional higher ed, I do not think we do a very good job of really differentiating what is good and what is bad. We make a lot of decisions based on prestige and other things, and we're making progress on that front. Sometimes grudgingly, the institutions themselves, but there's definitely movement in that direction. And so, I am bullish on the possibility that it's going in the right direction, but this is not, and this industry is responding to pressure, external pressure, and I think these non-traditional providers can impose that pressure. But so I guess the main thing I think about in this ecosystem is just the confusion. And so I guess the sort of start and is to think about sort of who is or should be responsible for helping to make sense of this rapid proliferation of credentials at all sorts of different levels, some of which we haven't seen before. Anant and edX produced MicroMasters, and we've seen similar sort of breaking down of the credentials at the undergrad, at the pre-baccalaureate level, from a much wider variety of providers, many of which are sort of unproven. And what are the most important developments needed to get to that stage of sense-making for learners, for employers, so that people can move through it?
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts there. I'm going to try to parse it down. And by the way, my 95% was that there'll be some improvement, which is how you phrased your question. I'm more pessimistic than you in terms of the speed. Mm-hmm. I think we'll get there, but mine was 30%. And the reason is because I think you have to ask yourself the question, given that we all want this, given that we need this, why is it not happening? And I think it's because the ecosystem is complex and it's dysfunctional, right? It's dysfunctional because let's just think about the whole idea of like a person getting a job and how that all happens. So you've got an employer, our employers in the US, they are undertaxed and pay less than, when it comes to this particular area than their peers around the world. in terms of skilling. I know in Great Britain there's a payroll tax which results in 90 cents on the pound, or 90 pence on the pound, being paid back to the employer for skilling up their people. Here we have no incentives really for employers to invest in talent. Even worse, the labor dynamic between the worker and the company is often strained, so you have people working on other sides of the table, and yet this is an ecosystem that has to serve both of those. So I think that's one huge issue. What do I think needs to happen? I think employers need to start to articulate more and reach in more. I think secondly, they need to, in reaching in more, they need to, instead of sitting back and saying, I'm going to filter out who I want and who I don't, right? To instead, I call it the Chobani model of, everybody can do some work here. And who's out there who I can get, and how do I get them working for me, working on my behalf? That was a different way of approaching things, but without that mindset shift, you're going to continue to find people who are kind of tossed to the side. And then I think lastly, I would say that I don't know what higher ed will do, but if it doesn't figure out how to become the standard bearer, through probably collectives, maybe through reformed accreditation and so forth, it will decline, right? Because the whole purpose of a credential is to help the labor economy understand what folks can do and how they plug into that labor economy. If they're not absolutely keyed in and sort of figuring this piece out, employers will figure it out for them and will leapfrog them. We already have seen this in the Silicon Valley area, in the tech space. They've sort of done it without colleges. And if I were a college administrator, I'd be concerned about that if I didn't understand that and wasn't working towards some of the things, for example, I think, Liesl, that you are.
Yeah, Anant next, and then we'll come back to this.
Yeah, I'll talk about two ways in which we can establish the bona fides of some of these credentials in a way that learners and companies and others can trust them. The first approach, we'll take an example from currencies. When paper money first came out, it was a piece of paper, for heaven's sake. People didn't trust it. But what you did was banks backed it with gold. So it was gold-backed currencies. Now, of course, they don't back it with anything, so it's just paper. But you can do the same thing with alternative credentials, where, for better or for worse, credit at universities is a currency of quality. When something is credit-backed, it's been approved by accreditors and all of that stuff. So what we did with a lot of our alternative credentials is back them with credit at the university. So our MicroMasters, for example, are backed by credit at a number of universities. Same thing with MicroBachelors. Our boot camps, many of them translate into credit, like the SMU Data Science Bootcamp. The university provides credit for it. So that is one signal of quality where a university and great names of universities. We're working with GW on a MicroMasters, with Western Governors on a MicroBachelors, where they will provide credit for these alternative credentials into their own degrees. That is one. I think the second one is, utter transparency of outcomes. I think we need to be, and I think that's true not just for alternative credentials. Heck, if we should do that, of course do that for degrees too. What are the outcomes? How many people are graduating? What are the income levels? So we write a transparency report where we show that our boot camps have a graduation rate of 78%. The median income increase after 1 year of a boot camp is $11,000, which more than makes up for and gives them the ROI on their investment. So I think transparency of outcomes is also key to establishing confidence that these are worthwhile.
But that's a relatively recent phenomenon, even in traditional higher ed, and that's one of the reasons why I think one of the positive developments, but it's one of the reasons why I think the higher education is being challenged. Liesl,
absolutely.
So one of the things that we have to think differently about within the university settings that are trying to create these kind of stackable systems is really getting down back to taking our learning objectives seriously, right? It's not just something that we have, it's sort of a very high level, really bringing those learning objectives down to even those micro levels so that you can figure out where you cut it, right? And it's not all like one credit, one credit, one credit. I think that's the other thing too, is the conversations with our faculty. really went down to the, if I really look at this one particular course I already do, some of this could actually be done in 7 weeks. Some of this could be done in 2. Some of this really has to be done in 3. And so I think it's really, in many ways, what's needed is sort of a re-socialization, and I think, of the way we think about learning, much back to the basics, but then figuring out how we cut, number one. Number two, when you do that, what you realize is a lot of those cuts map back to not just skills, because the word skills and credentials are over and over again, but when you're in a university setting, what you also see, it's not just skills. There's actual knowledge and their abilities. So it's really the full KSA that you'll have in any given one course, particularly in your professional schools, but really in other schools as well. And there, I think, are some really interesting opportunities for partnerships with some of these other players. And that's where I don't think we all have to think about building it all ourselves, particularly in the online space, where we can much more readily partner not only with other companies or other types of more for-profit institutions, but also with other universities themselves. I think increasingly you hear conversations about credentials that may actually come out through a consortium of universities, each one having real deep strengths in certain areas, but when you stack up those strengths, you now have a new area that wouldn't have really come about if you were solely restricted to the inside institution. So in short, I think we have to start thinking differently inside our institutions, but also really thinking outside the box about how we partner in these credentials and thinking about them as KSAs, not just S.
Ashutosh?
So I'll expose my ignorance here because I don't come from higher ed, traditional higher ed. And my perspective is probably more controversial. I don't think, so I'll start with a quote that I learned from my previous boss, which is, a credential without market value is a scam. It's really important to understand what's behind that, which is it's all about skills that the market values, not what some institution believes they should value. So the whole conversation here about, is this about micro-credentials or degrees? I think that's a little bit of a red herring. There are plenty of examples of people sort of abusing the traction of micro-credentials, but I was just at ASU+GSV in India. You hear about the skills epidemic in India, where there's so many people who have degrees, yet they have a skills epidemic going on over there. So it's not about micro-credentials versus degrees. It's about what are the skills that you're going to acquire, what is the market value of those skills, and the best judge of that market value is industry certifications, and higher ed is primarily responsible for delivering those things, in my opinion.
But Ashutosh, just to argue with you, we've got to get some argument on the panel, Doug.
Sounds good. I'm ready to go.
I'm totally
Bill
with
was
you
teed
that
up. Bill was
skills,
teed up to do it. But go ahead.
I want to hear what you have to say.
Totally with you that skills are important. But I think this panel is about, is are degrees the only way, the only vehicle to impart those skills?
Absolutely
or can
not.
we also have it's an and thinking, micro-credentials and degrees. Some big, Liesl, as you said, some big skills and big career pathways, you go get a degree. If you want to upskill, let's say you're a software developer and you need to upskill, learn some AI now, everybody needs to learn AI, you don't need to get a degree, get a credential. And so I think this panel is about what credentials do we have for the right set of skills.
Yeah, I think the credentials are all, I mean, I'm completely sold on stackable credentials. It's about offering a menu of choices to the learner, and it's providing them flexible pathways. Who says that you have to complete a degree in 4 years?
The government.
And that's part of the problem.
But that's probably
part of the problem.
If you take a break, you lose your funding, for school. So I think one of the challenges that we're in right now is we're talking about a lot of good ideas, and I think, Doug, the question that you raised is really important about where is quality going to come from, and the reason is because Ashutosh, is that Ashutosh? Yeah. What the currency is around what employers care about, what industry cares about, not the only thing. Society and has their own interest in having good, educated citizens, but the only way that these credentials will be valued is if there's partnership between employers and industry and higher ed to be able to do this at scale. I know we spend a lot of time doing this. We're working with 50 community colleges right now on something we call micro pathways, which is essentially a stacked credential system that's an alternative concept to, say, a degree program. It's a micro-credential program. The reason why the program is important is because there's a human being in it, and they want to feel like they belong to an industry, they want to feel like they're advancing, that they're moving somewhere, but they also want to make sure that they get a job at the end. So we've innovated a bunch of things to allow for competency-based, skills-based definition and alignment of each of these micro-credentials so that once you get them, an employer is able to say, yep, you've got what I need. What we're trying to do in addition with that, and there are some other areas we're doing similarly, but with the micro pathway in particular, is to say, well, why can't this be a design pattern for quality, right? And there are people who are trying to measure ex post quality. So there's, EQUOS, the JFF is doing, which is great, and some other initiatives. But that tells us quality like years later, right? I'm an engineer by training. We do ex ante quality, just like your architect on your house hopefully has done, where you design quality in and you know it's quality because of the way it's designed. And I think what's happening now is there's a number of innovations. We haven't gotten full agreement about this, but there's, I think, a convergence on what quality is. So the next step, and we want to be part of leading this, is the conversation about what do we agree to as a quality blueprint, and then let's start building things to that. And that will allow employers, who 95% of whom are saying they're doing and want to do skills-based hiring and training, it'll give them something to adopt and let the rest.
Especially because the employers aren't. While the employers are often held up as knowing exactly what they want. They send lots of mixed messages, and so one of the, and I guess you've got the word design in your organization's name. We may not love the design of how the whole degree thing was built, but it worked for a long time. And I guess what worries me, or what I think we need to get to, is a similarly designed ecosystem for credentials. I mean, I was thinking back, and I had recently Anya Kamenetz on a podcast talking about her DIY university from a decade ago, and I was a pretty big skeptic about how many students could design their own path, and I remain to some extent a little skeptical. I think if we don't provide some clarity, we're going to end up with lots more bad outcomes. And that's where I think there's a lot of work to be done. And that's where, just having covered this industry for a few decades.
So I have a concrete example of that, but I'll let Leslie go first and then.
No, go ahead.
So, I learned of this really interesting thing when I was in India. They have 40 million learners on a particular platform where they're all seeking to get skills so that they can get a job. They already have degrees. So what I learned was that they have an offering where you sign up for a 4-year degree program. Built into the offering is that you're going to drop out after the first year, and you're going to go get a job, and you're going to get a certificate. And then you'll come back after so many months or years later, and then you'll get the second one, and you'll get a diploma. So this, and constructs like that allow students to compose what they need and what their employers need in the context of their life. We shouldn't be deciding what's the right thing for a student.
No, but it also shouldn't be a free-for-all.
Of course not.
And so that's
there's
where
some examples.
That's
some
where
concepts.
no, 100%. That's where the pathways come. Liesl, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, 2 different points. I think first, when going back to who should play a role in this. I mean, we see accreditation agencies struggling with this. I mean, when we told our accreditor we now have 27 different stackable certificates, it kind of really, the look on their face of like, oh my God, all of the different learning objectives that we're going to have to map back. Or my internal system, when they had to key in all of those different learning objectives multiplied by 27. And then when you could stack any 2 into an interdisciplinary degree, I literally got to use factorial for the first time in an actual application. I ran around the office saying, oh my God, this is the first time I've ever got to use this part of that I learned in school. But it's true, it was 277 different combinations. So I think accreditation agencies, are having those kind of conversations now about how to measure learning on this. But they, I think, have a very central role to play. But going back, I can't help but, since you had your controversial thing, I'm going to say my controversial thing, and that is,
good.
Look, don't get me wrong, I come from business school. I am very concerned about making sure what we're offering in a classroom translates into ROI for our students and our employers. But I think we're neglecting the fact, when we start talking about these credentials instead of degrees, instead of bachelor degrees, I think we have to remember we also owe something to society, not just the economy. And for our young people, I have a freshman son getting ready to start, and to think about, even though he wants to go into engineering, him only learning about something that his employer is going to teach him, when I know through our secondary system, there's still a lot about history, about politics, about society, that doesn't maybe necessarily translate to the kind of saving the ocean engineering firm that he wants to work for, but is going to make him a better voting citizen and human in our society. That's where I start to get scared, because that's knowledge that can be compartmentalized into micro-credentials, but I think should be paired with skills micro-credentials and ability-focused micro-credentials as well.
Yeah, I think it's very clear that both are important. You need the things that impart knowledge, and you also want the career-focused skills. Parents who send their kids to college and kids who come to college, the number one thing they want out of college is to get a job. And it's not to, as professors, we can have grandiose plans. We want to create better citizens and better humans. Sure. But learners are coming in and paying all the money because they want a job, and they want economic security. And so I think, and in many universities, as they graduate, they're not getting the skills to put on their resume. So one of the things that we do in India, as an example, we work with several universities, and D.Y. Patil University in Mumbai is one example. What they do is students graduate with a degree, and at the same time, they embed many of our certificates into their degree program as part of our enterprise offering. Think of it as B2U, where the university will take our professional certificate or a boot camp and embed that inside the degree. So when the student graduates, they have a bachelor's or a BBA or an MBA, and they also get a certificate in data science from GWU or other university. And ultimately, that's great for the university because their reputation is enhanced as their students get, what fraction of students got great jobs. And so they're finding that the certificates plus the degree provides those critical career-focused skills. So it's really think of it as an and, not an or.
So I have a concrete example of that we do at WGU. Our cybersecurity program in my college has 15,000 degree-seeking students in it today. One of the reasons why it has grown so much is because we have industry standard certs embedded into the curriculum. So as students attain those certifications, most of them are working learners, they get promotions, they get salary increases. So the point here is, I think there is a way to stack all this stuff together. I don't think it is a degree versus micro-credentials conversation.
Yeah, it's definitely not that I think is like the panel from 3 years ago. I think the panel now is, how do we know someone ought to get credit for something? So I want to kind of go back to this issue of adult learners. We talked about, the some degree non-completers, 40 million or so. The other stat being 60+% of adults not having a degree. Those people, we've had a lot of college completion agenda work going on for the last 10, 15, as long as I've been in ed tech. It's not erased that. I mean, it's cut into it a little bit, but we still have 40% of folks who are sitting in the wilderness saying, gee, I'm in a world that doesn't know how to value me, certainly to get into my first job, or to advance in any meaningful way. So I think one of the things that we're working on as well is this notion of skills visibility or validated skills. How do you know someone has validated skills? And I think one of the things that colleges and universities are going to have to do, and we're encouraging community colleges to do this, is give credit, and WGU has pioneered this, frankly, give credit for what people have the demonstrated ability to do, not the demonstrated ability to sit in a chair in a classroom or online in a classroom, because frankly, that's not solving the problem. And I think the second piece is when we do engage them in the learning process, let's not put them into debt. If you're in a cybersecurity, I'm not going to ask you because I don't know, I don't want to, maybe you've got good stats or bad stats on this, so you don't know the stats, but anybody going into a cybersecurity program, if anybody has debt in that program, that's a crime. We are so far under-resourced in cybersecurity that anybody who's signing up and saying, I want to get into this industry, ought to be there ought to be a way for them to have a living wage and learn what they need to learn so they can get into the program. You know, if they want to go into debt because they want to accelerate their pathway, that's another story. But to require people to go into debt so that they can have a life, so that industry can sit there and benefit and grow is problematic. And I'll just leave a model that we've been starting to play around with is the idea of a 10-year degree. Like, because it's not good enough, I think, just for students to, you know, get a stackable thing and a stackable thing there. I mean, would you do this to your kid? Is say, good luck. I hope you get enough stacks in your stack to be successful. But maybe we can socialize the notion of their alternative ways of growing. We talk about the weave of learning, earning, and living. And I believe we have to really think about how we do that and design programs that way. And I think there are a new class of degree programs that may come out of that, a new class of degree experience as a result. But I think that's where the conversation needs to go.
Well, and some of the things that have to happen, and again, this is why I tend to see things unfolding much more slowly than a lot of people in rooms at a conference like this do. But the reward system needs to change, both for institutions, and there's some work being done about our way of classifying institutions focuses on degrees, period. The Carnegie classifications, that's what they do. There's talk of a change there. And then some of you may not have seen the news yet that came out from Carnegie and ETS this morning, but you know, in terms of your suggestion that we need to move into a more competency way of measuring learning, two very long-standing architects of our current system, the Carnegie Foundation, which created the credit hour, and ETS, which has made lots of money based on traditional assessments, are pioneering a new set of competency-based assessments to measure high school learning and college and career readiness. And many things need to happen before it becomes something, but those organizations actually move this along. I think it could go some way. But I do think there are some structural impediments here, and I think that, so we got about a couple of minutes left. I don't know if there's anybody have any questions in the audience? Sure, go ahead. Well, and that's, we've all said both and, everybody up here said both and the whole time, and I think that's right, because there is, and first of all, the word skills, I agree, is narrow, although the skills that most employers want are creative thinking and critical thinking and communication. So those are among the skills that are part of this,
yes,
that
absolutely
are part of this. And so, but I do think that the other problem is that it's no longer good enough to say, we provide an education for a lifetime of work. You also need to help people get first jobs, and that's where it's also both and either extreme is flawed and not going to get it done. We are unfortunately about out of time. Thanks to this great group, Anant Agarwal, Ashutosh, Tiwary, Liesl, Riddle, and Bill Hughes. Thanks to all of you.